Hello everyone. It's very late and it's something different today. I ignored this mess. This I have a mess here and I'm trying to do a thing. I don't know if that's very far away. We can try fixing it. I don't know if it will work, but I can try. Let me okay, wait. Me. Okay. This is quite a mess. Oops. Okay. So, oh my, what I'm trying to do here, even if it doesn't look like it, uh, I'm I didn't feel like playing video games for a while now. Not because of reasons, and oh, I might move a lot. Wait, okay, okay. So I thought that maybe it would be more fun if I did something that I usually that I haven't shown in general here, which is my art. More here, okay. I usually I'm ignore this block. Wait, let me get it out of the way for now. I usually don't show this in general. Uh, it's been a while, and I mean I don't like placing it because my camera isn't that good per se. I haven't had my a better setup in general. Might try to get it sometime. I'm not sure yet. So what I want to show today is, or tonight more like it, is my paintings, because I've been painting a lot for this DSMPTOBER thingy instead of drawing like in digital, as you can see. Uh, I've had my experience with it and stuff, but like I wanted to try something different in this case. Right now I have a base, a thing. It's gonna it's mirrored. I don't know if I can fix that. Wait, let me see if I can even clean this thing. I'm not sure if it will work. Sorry for the noise. Okay, that's a little bit better. Okay, okay. So right now we've got this sketch, and I'm gonna paint it. Right now I already have some stuff in here, which are the colors, blue and green, because of the other painting I made early today, which was this. It's for it's mirrored. Right, I was supposed to fix that. I'm not sure if I can. Uh, mm, I'm not sure if I can mirror it. Oh, okay. Okay, this seems to be working now. Okay, this is how it looks. This is actually what it is. It doesn't. You can see it very well. I think. I mean, it's a bit. I don't know. This is for day 14, which is tomorrow. So, and for the next day is this. I haven't been in the mood to play games or go into Minecraft in general. Um, Makes me feel a bit weird or sad. So I decided to make do this. In the case of the right now in the navigation, this thing, I wanted to put a thing. I was thinking that maybe we could watch this while we while I paint. I'm not sure if it's gonna. Oh my gosh.
Porque cuando nos unimos, todo sabe mejor.
Okay.
Filadelfia.
They're coming. They're coming your way.
Okay.
They'll be here soon.
I'm not sure if that's gonna work. I already. No. Okay, it's not working. Wait. Okay, that didn't work. I'm gonna try using something different, which should be the capture. This. Okay. This. I'm not sure. Okay, it's gonna work. Okay. Let me just pass some stuff over here because I won't be able to open it in my other screen. And maybe these two. What else? Oh wait, I should check how does it sound, because I have no idea how it sounds, to be honest. Okay, it doesn't sound that bad, I think. I couldn't connect the other microphone. I mean, I could, but it would. Oh, okay. I mean, I could use this instead. But then I wouldn't be able to use this or put it here, I guess. And that moves a lot. Okay. Oof, okay. I'm getting a bit sidetracked. Oh, well, a lot sidetracked. No. Okay. Okay. Where's the okay? I'm gonna make it small. Oh, what happened? Oh shoot! Oh shoot! Okay. Let me just get this out of the way and put this here. Okay. I'm gonna place this. Oops. Okay.
They're coming. They're coming your way. They'll be here soon.
Wait.
Be ready.
Okay. Okay. Should be fun. This is let me move. Okay, I cannot move it well. Okay, it's very jumpy. Okay. I'm not sure if it's changing all the pictures in the square. Let me lower the volume on this. Okay. Hopefully that's okay. Maybe that's how it works. So painting while hearing Traumaton because I feel like dying or something. Okay. I cannot hear it so well.
Innocent piece of media into a creepypasta horror story, I would call it
There you go.
pastification. A seemingly harmless piece of
Okay,
media
I
that's
think that should
somehow
be
turned into
good.
some
I'm not sure
oddball
how it
story of
sounds.
accident,
If
suicide,
it sounds
how
weird,
it's
do
possessed
tell me.
by a
I'm
vengeful
trying my
spirit or
best to make it
something like that. It happens all the
not
time.
suck.
One pastification I never really thought would happen is with
Okay.
Super Mario 64. Well, I mean, I've seen a ton of it before in the past when I was a kid and I read creepypastas all the time. I mean, they were everywhere, but in the year 2020,
So,
like that
wait.
stuff is still popular?
So,
Yeah. Over the summer,
okay. So I don't think I'm going to talk a lot. It's mostly to chill in general. So Please enjoy this chilling time while we watch Traumaton and paint for a bit. Hopefully, I can finish this painting before Traumaton finishes, which is 5 hours. I really, really hope I do not freaking finish it in 5 hours. So there's that. My microphone is gonna be probably turned off, so we can enjoy Dramaton, and I don't wanna make it so badly. I'm not sure if I'm gonna get a strike or anything, uh, but yeah, that's that. Hope you enjoy this.
Someone on 4chan posted an iceberg on Mario 64 and the many obscure details of it. Many of the details anyone can point out and say, oh yeah, I know about that, but some other parts of the iceberg were far more obscure or downright horrifying. It's where the meme, every copy of Mario 64 is personalized, came from. It's actually not one of the worst creepypasta-esque stories I've read, and with the contributions of some key YouTubers, it would make you think that maybe what this post is saying is true. Hell, I'd roughly say 90% of this iceberg is in fact true, albeit in a vague way. And if you want to know what I mean by that, just check out the video by this young man right here, who I can't remember his name, but I remember his video, and it was incredibly fascinating and very entertaining, so please give him some love. It'll be in the description down below. Yet as interesting or downright silly as some of these are, there's something I personally couldn't get out of my mind, and that is simply this. Mario 64 was always scary, either unintentionally or purposely. Mario 64 has a cavalcade of horror lurking beneath its kid-friendly exterior. I believe it has to do with two reasons. Number one, the graphics. The game's looks have not aged well, and it's because of its low textures and jagged appearance that makes it seem a bit uncanny. I might be speaking personally here, but when I saw that scary eel monster from Jolly Roger Bay again in Super Mario Odyssey, I really wasn't as spooked as I was when I was a kid. It's most likely because now I'm an adult, and looking back at my childhood fears still gives me shivers, but really, compare the two. The one in 64 is so much worse than the HD revision. I mean, sure, I'm not saying it's not scary, but to me personally, the newer version just looks so detailed and kinda cool that it pales in comparison to the older one. This one just has this air of weird and disturbing qualities about it. It's not just Mario 64 either. Look back at any old games you used to play. Don't some of these look way scarier back then as opposed to now? Have you guys ever stumbled upon a weird glitch in a modern video game that make the characters look low poly or low res and super creepy? It's something about the way they look, the way they move. It's all sort of unnerving and strange. Again, it could be due to childhood fears playing into our biases, but it can't be denied that low poly textures can be really disturbing. The game studio Puppet Combo recognizes this and uses it to their advantage. It's why their games are so horrifying. They use this niche trope to their advantage by mimicking old school graphics into modern takes of horror, but I'm getting off track here. The second reason why Mario 64 was terrifying to us kids is simply because it was our first time exploring a 3D space. Imagine how much of a mindfuck that is, to go from going left to right to explore literally wherever we want, which can lead to some of us discovering fears we'd otherwise never would have, from diving into deep dark oceans with terrifying sea creatures to exploring haunted mansions full of ghosts and monsters. Mario 64 gave us the opportunity to go anywhere and fear everything. Seriously, how many of you were scared of the ocean after playing Mario 64 as a kid? How many of you were terrified of sinking into quicksand? A lot of these things might have been totally innocent to the developers of the game at the time, but these things really scared a lot of us to death. I knew some people who were terrified of pianos of all things after playing Mario 64. Even when revisiting this game, as I'm sure many of you are, what with the release of the Super Mario 3D All-Stars collection, there's some things you can still find unsettling. Nowadays, people are talking about wet, dry worlds, haunting background, negative aura, emotion thing, whatever. It's really just a photo of Caceres, a little town located in Spain. but something's just off about this background. To me, it was always the juxtaposition of Mario's colorful, wacky world side by side with this very real city, with its cold, eerie blue washing over the town, almost making it seem submerged. Then you realize, wait, the town is submerged. The people who lived here are long gone by now. The buildings are all empty. How long has it been this way? What caused it to be submerged? Did everyone just forget about it? Did everyone really escape? What if there are still bodies in those buildings? The unfortunate souls that could just never escape in time. Are they forgotten too? Forever underwater in this forgotten city? These are real thoughts I had as a kid, by the way. This is the thoughts I had when I saw Wet Dry World's background. It's the little things that add up and make you scared. The small, almost innocuous details that the devs glazed over still haunt many people to this day. Then there's this stuff that makes you think, wait, did the devs actually intend to creep us out? For example, did you know that a strange laugh can be heard before you enter Boo's mansion and Big Boo's haunt? Seriously, take a listen. Creepy, right? Most of you would assume that it's just Boo's laughter, but that's not how a Boo's laugh sounds like. It sounds like this. We already know the secret behind Boo's laugh, which is essentially Bowser's laugh just sped up. But if that's the case, then whose laughter is this? It's not King Boo because he laughs just like any other Boo. It can't even be explained as to how it activates. It just randomly happens sometimes. So if you ever want to try this out in Mario 3D All-Stars, do try and let me know what your results are. Speaking of Bowser though, did anyone else hate dying in Mario 64? Not just because it was annoying to start the whole level again, but because it was just, well, kind of creepy. It's not like nowadays where Mario just dies like he just stubbed his toe or something. Mario legitimately dies. You can see X's in his eyes when he's killed. The way he sinks into the sand always fucking terrified me. And drowning? Jesus Christ, why did they ever depict him drowning so realistically? I even mentioned this in the previous Traumathon when I was talking about water levels being just horrifying, and this is one of the reasons. To be fair though, a lot of games did this whole drowning thing, though I'll have a whole video dedicated to that soon. And of course, who can forget Bowser's terrifying laugh and that scary Bowser symbol that fades everything to black, and when you get a game over, you get this real creepy red error screen with that really slowed down, super creepy game over music. Thankfully, it doesn't last very long and just sort of fades away as Mario's Viagra kicks in. Let's not forget the infinite staircase also. I mean, Christ, I really don't think I have anything to say that everybody's already said thus far. There's a ton more eerie details that Mario 64 has that I'm sure I've missed, and in a way, this game really was personalized for everyone. What you might have found scary in Mario 64 might have been totally fine for others and vice versa. Everyone had their own unique experience. Some of us can bond over certain things while others will just roll their eyes and just say, it's just a video game, there's nothing scary about it. The tradition of Mario being a scary game though doesn't end here, as that tradition has carried on. Mario Sunshine still harbors some terrifying stuff itself. Remember that huge eel that was just sunken down in the very depths of the ocean that's like so dark and horrifying you gotta clean his teeth? Like, fuck that. And Galaxy, I'm sure, has its own list of horrifying encounters and Easter eggs, but if I talk about every single detail that every Mario game has that's creepy, I might just be here for a very long time. Let me know what you guys think. Is there anything in particular I missed that scared you in Mario 64? Maybe other Mario games that had certain elements that made you shiver? Or maybe there's something you know that most of us don't. Something that lurks even deeper within the Mario games. Something that can't be explained or otherwise could never be seen. For a lot of kids nowadays, the introduction to horror is plentiful. You got games that are just safe enough to be parent approved, TV shows that can be easily accessed online at any time, and most horror movies nowadays are PG-13, and even if it were a rated R movie, then kids nowadays can just wait a month or two, and then they'll just be back up on HBO or Netflix or Hulu or whatever service that you pay. Pick your poison, there's like 50 of them. Really, anyone can watch any horror film they want. But back in the 80s and 90s, when most horror films were made exclusively for adults, and parents thinking games were the product of Satan, it was a lot more difficult to get your hands on spooky stuff as a kid. That is until 1993, when here in the States, a book series swept the nation with its unique approach to horror, that being horror aimed directly at children, Goosebumps. It was an interesting take on the way horror was produced because at this point in the early 90s and late 80s, kids weren't really allowed to watch any horror movies whatsoever. A lot of them were rated R. We had to just sneak into theaters to watch some of the scary stuff adults kept talking about, like Nightmare on Elm Street, Friday the 13th, and a slew of other classic horror films that were in the theaters at the time. And like I said, back then horror films were often rated R, so for a lot of us, it was our first time seeing naked girls and a ton of gore. Yeah, it was cool, but maybe a little too much for some more fragile minds. Enter R.L. Stines, a novelist who at the time was known for making children's literature and worked on a few Nickelodeon projects. Before working on Goosebumps, R.L. Stine showed his love for horror through a different series of books he called the Fear Street books, aimed for a younger audience and a much less talked about series. His love for horror and his writing talent would then soar to greater heights when Scholastic and Parachute Press decided to collaborate and launch R.L. Stine's Goosebumps series in 1992. The book was a massive hit amongst kids. You know, back when kids actually read books. No, seriously, the 90s was the last time you'd see books get commercials on TV, and boy, they must have worked really well because they made R.L. Stine's a household name seemingly overnight. Although as effective as I'm sure these ads were, a lot of the credit in Goosebumps' success has to go to the legendary cover artist Tim Jacobus. His Goosebumps art was incredible, and more so than that, eye-catching. I know we're not supposed to judge a book by its cover, but damn, when your covers look as cool and as interesting as this, oh, you can't help but be interested. That's not to discredit Mr. Stine's writing. The man was a master of cliffhangers and twist endings. It's what made his books such page turners. You really couldn't just stop reading these things. And there were dozens of them. From 1992 to 1997, R.L. Stines had published 62 Goosebumps books, each of them as memorable as the last. Well, okay, maybe not too memorable. Yeah, actually reading back on some of these, they can be kind of cheesy and a little goofy at times. I mean, keep in mind, this isn't horror made for us, and by us I mean the general demographic of 18 to 30-year-olds. I mean this was made for kids ages 7 and up, so of course most of the horror was dialed back to meet the expectations of children. Nowadays, I'd argue your average kid is desensitized to a lot of this stuff, like scary dolls coming to life. That's nothing. Have you ever seen Freddy fucking Fazbear? That dude is a zombie robot thing that'll just stuff your mangled body into an animatronic while you're still alive. Like honestly, if some of these kids just went back in time and saw some of the shit that we were into, they'd laugh at us and just call us dweebs. But of course, as scary as the books were, we can't ignore the absolute classic television series that is Goosebumps. Airing first in 1995 and ending in 1998, Goosebumps brought almost every book to life, as well as having their own ideas, making each one just an episode long. Now, you might think that half an hour might be too short to really capture every nuanced thing that made the original book it's basing itself on scary, and yeah, you'd be right. I mean, these books are short, don't get me wrong, they're all averaging around 120 pages each, which could be read by most people in about a day or two, but 120 pages condensed to 24 minutes? Well, I mean, hopefully that doesn't lead into anything awkward, right?
No! No! No!
Yeah, needless to say, the show was just about as cheesy as the books. Even for the 90s, this stuff was corny. Keep in mind, the 90s was a turning point in kids' media in general. It wasn't just Goosebumps changing the way horror was being made, but stuff like Mortal Kombat was changing the way we viewed video games. WWE was changing the way we viewed wrestling. The Simpsons changed the way we viewed cartoons, and a slew of other things made this otherwise violent content more available to kids. And when Goosebumps was coming out as a TV show, well, it was entering a bold new world, but also needed to be kid-friendly enough for mom and dads to be satisfied with. Still, I won't say the show wasn't scary. I actually really liked the episode titled The Haunted Mask, which was about, well, a haunted mask, and I think most people actually really enjoyed that episode. I think the mask is still very creepy, but the part where she tries to get it off her and she's just freaking out, noticing that part of her body is basically just becoming the mask, telling everyone that she's not herself anymore, and she slowly begins to transform into this horrible creature. I mean, that's just classic horror. And of course, how can you mention this episode without mentioning the absolute freaky scene where she visits the mask maker and there's just a bunch of floating masks and they have this distorted voice and they're just like begging her to join them, and it's so terrifying. It's still vivid in my memory to this day. I mean, have a look. Other than that though, with the limited time each episode had to work with, give or take around extra 20 minutes if you're special enough, I think the show worked well for a sort of baby's first horror, if you will. Need I remind you that this stuff wasn't made for us. It was made for a new kind of horror audience, a much younger demographic. And while that doesn't excuse it for being bad or being totally cheesy, it was a one-of-a-kind experience. But that's not to say that adults like us can't enjoy Goosebumps. It is a very well-written show, and again, R.L. Stines is a very talented writer who knows what he's doing when it comes to the twists and turns, and there's still some spooky stuff that even us as adults can find totally eerie. They're a lot of fun, regardless of who they're made for. And I feel like that speaks in volumes of R.L. Stine's writing. It was like the Twilight Zone for us back then, except in color and not as boring. Nowadays, R.L. Stine still makes horror for a younger audience with his latest series called The Haunting Hour, hitting TV around 2014. And of course, we can't forget the recent Goosebumps movies that have been coming out in the past couple of years, featuring Jack Black as, of course, R.L. Stine's. Although I am a bit sad to say that Tim Jacobus' art has been replaced with newer iterations of the book's publishing, and I gotta say, I'm really not feeling it. They're just too colorful and they just sort of lack that creepiness that made the old covers classic. Now they're just sort of modernized and not in the best way. Not that they're bad or anything, they're just not the first images that come to my head when I think horror, let alone Goosebumps. Oh well, book covers might have changed, but the stories are still there. The show is still there. Here's to the man who got me into horror. May he continue to show everyone just what it means to get goosebumps.
Have a scary day, everyone.
This one might seem new to most of you, unless of course you're Hispanic and grew up in a Hispanic household just like me. See, back in the 90s and the 2000s, there was this massive show called Sábado Gigante that aired on Univision, a Latin American channel that hosted everything from drama to news to daytime talk shows, movies. Yeah, it was great. For my mom and dad, at least.
Pruébala. Es cocaína.
Yeah, even though I speak Spanish, I didn't really like what Univision used to air. Hell, I bet I still wouldn't like if I saw what they aired still. It's all just adult stuff, I used to think. Cartoon Network was still the channel for me, a growing, healthy kid. Though as much as I really didn't care for Univision, Sábado Gigante, or Gigantic Saturday, was a show I actually really didn't mind watching. There's just sort of a comforting nostalgia when I think back at Sábado Gigante, because I remember those calm Saturday nights, sitting close to everyone on the couch or on the floor. My entire family would gather together, get some food or snacks, and watch this 4-hour long show. Yeah, you heard it right. 4 hours long. What the hell could they be doing for 4 hours? And what the hell is this show doing on Traumathon? Well, to answer your first question, Sábado Gigante was a sort of variety show that pretty much had everything. Hence the phrase variety show. It had drama, it had comedy, contests, beauty pageants, lie detector tests, live concerts. I mean, Christ, you name it and they had it, and it was all presented by the legendary Don Francisco. It was a real melting pot of a show. Think of it like the Maury Povich Show meets Saturday Night Live meets Ellen DeGeneres meets Oprah meets America's Got Talent. Never mind. You really can't compare Sábado Gigante with anything, maybe except a massive party contained on TV. It was a unique experience that sadly got cancelled in 2015. Although, as much as I enjoyed it, there was that one part of the show that I really hated. If you were a small little Mexican boy or girl at the time, then you'll know exactly who I'm talking about. Yeah, that's right. That slimy, ugly, trumpet-blowing creep El Chacal, or in English, the Jackal. See, towards the end of the show, they'd have a singing contest where contestants tried their best to impress the audience with whatever talent in singing they had. Although, let's be honest, most of these people were probably drunk or just wanted an excuse to be on TV, so 9 times out of 10 they'd pretty much fail instantly. What makes it worse is that El Chacal acted as a heckler and tried to intimidate, distract, or straight up harass the guests. Well, I mean, Don Francisco also tried to distract the guests by wearing stupid hats, which I guess is distracting, but he was more motivational than he was a massive prick like El Chacal. El Chacal would then blow on his trumpet and eliminate the guest, and I swear sometimes he just did it because he just didn't like the people. No, not because of the fact that they were bad at singing, but because there were just something about them that he just didn't like. I'm telling you, this asshole scared the shit out of me as a kid, and I really can't tell you why. It's something about his ghost-like appearance, his weird smile, his creepy attitude, and honestly, just for the fact that he was just a huge cunt. Sometimes he'd just blow his horn so early, the guests barely even had a chance. I was told by my family that sometimes El Chacal would come and get me and feed me to the lions if I didn't behave. Oh, which, by the way, that is something they did sometimes. Yes, that lion scared the shit out of me too as a kid. My family told me when El Chacal blows his horn, the contestants are thrown into the lion's pit and mauled to death. What makes it worse is that they'd throw out a goofy skeleton to play up the shtick that the lion really killed him. Okay, obviously he didn't. But I was a dumb little 6-year-old. I really believe they kill the contestants off screen and rip their flesh and organs out. I mean, I didn't think the lion was real, for God's sake, or anything like that. I just thought that he was a murderer, which, to be fair, is 10 times scarier than if he were just a lion. I mean, seriously, think about it. What's scarier, a man dressed up as a lion who murders you, or an actual lion? I thought the fucking former was way scarier. I'd sometimes have nightmares of this guy coming into my dreams just to harass me and tease me before he got bored and straight up murdered me. I fucking hated this guy. I swear I cried multiple times just at the sight of this stupid fucking freak. I hate him. And I'm glad to know I'm not alone on that either. I'm seeing a lot of comments nowadays saying how much they were scared of El Chacal as a kid, which makes me feel a lot better. That doesn't change the past, and frankly, I'm glad this motherfucking show got cancelled. Anything to get this stupid asshole off the air. Fuck you, El Chacal. For some reason, gaming culture seems to attract a lot of outlandish and creepy theories. This is pretty recent, as with the rise of social media makes it easier for all of us to just throw out ideas like whether or not we killed Gary's Raticate in Pokemon Red or Blue, or if every Nintendo franchise somehow takes place in the same universe, you know, stuff like that. Then there's the theories that are made simply because the story itself necessitates it. Classic examples, of course, being Five Nights at Freddy's and Dark Souls. It's weird to compare the two, I know, but these are both games that don't really talk too much about their stories, but have a ton of clues scattered throughout their worlds to give you a glimpse into a much deeper lore that hides beneath. Theories are fun, if not sometimes stupid. Either way, I never really read a theory that's ever put me in a sour mood or got me so mad that I needed to rant about it, because in the end, we're talking about video games. It's harmless in the end. Okay. This is the part where about like 300 people message me in the comments below about a theory that'll get me mad, like some SJW bullshit. I don't care about that. Listen, my point is, these theories make you think and seldom ever have any truth behind them, making us freely express ourselves to the fullest potential. Yet as creative and silly as many of these are, sometimes they hit so close to the truth that it's hard to imagine they'd be wrong. One such theory is the Squall is dead theory, a theory seemingly revolving itself around Final Fantasy VIII's main character Squall, who, as this theory suggests, met his tragic end halfway through the game as Ultimecia impaled Squall at the end of Disc 1. The theory goes that this fatal blow to Squall's chest ended up killing him instantly. If not that, then the fall did. Everything after Disc 1 is allegedly just a dream. One thing that helps prove this theory is Squall's wound being healed fully, as if he were never stabbed in the first place. Other evidence includes the inclusion of a new, never-before-seen being known as the Moombas, seemingly just coming out of nowhere. One of the other, more creepier evidence of this being the case is during the cutscene where Squall and Rinoa are sharing a beautiful moment together towards the end of the game. As a shooting star passes by, Rinoa points at it to Squall, and the two embrace lovingly. Yet, in this cutscene, we can see a different perspective. Rinoa, at the very same balcony, pointing at the same star in the sky, can just be seen alone on that balcony. No one is there with her. It could be argued that Squall is just out of frame, but it's hard to say, as the camera eventually just dies. Yet, it's important to note that Squall was never caught on camera previously as this cutscene went on. But then comes this real kicker, the thing that almost solidifies this theory, which is the part where Squall is lost within the time compression after fighting Ultimecia. You explore around a little bit before you're given this strange psychedelic cutscene that makes Squall question who he is. This cutscene is supposed to illustrate time and space leaving Squall behind, but for some, it's an indicator of Squall losing his memories and his identity as he begins to slowly drift into the darkness that is eternal death. It's really a terrifying cutscene. Everything's so blurry. Rinoa begins to become this scary blob of nothingness, while some shots are repeated over and over again, illustrating this time loop that Squall is trapped in, this infinite spiral of memories and darkness. And then, as the cutscene reaches its climax, everything comes collapsing inwards and starts flashing different cutscenes prior as Rinoa starts to approach the camera over and over again, and she's way more distorted and indistinguishable. Until finally everything sort of snaps as Rinoa's spacesuit visor breaks, which is a haunting image, honestly. It sort of seems like she's been dead for years out in space, just floating there. It's really a haunting image, even if we take the Final Fantasy context out of it, just to be forever alone in space, nothing to see, nothing to do, dying slowly until your corpse eventually decays. Only it'd probably be super preserved, as there are no insects or microorganisms out there in space to eat your flesh, so you're just a pale body forever floating out there. Oh, and let's not forget the classic faceless Squall. Wow, that's really creepy. I actually only just started recently playing Final Fantasy VIII. Well, recently as in like 8 or 7 years ago, but I always thought this image of Squall was some fan-made thing for a creepypasta or some other thing, but no, it's real. It's in the game, and it's just as haunting as ever. Probably even more so now that we know that the context is just Squall losing all sense of reality, time, space, and memories, and everything in between. Though if we were to take this theory that Squall is dead seriously, then this is the image of Squall finally coming to terms with his death as he realizes that his body is just an empty husk, soulless and rotting. It's a very haunting image, and if you were a kid playing this, as I'm sure most of us were, you probably really scared the shit out of yourself. It's also just a really intense cutscene. Like, you've never really seen this from anybody else other than Square Enix. And at the time, they were the pioneers of FMVs, or full motion videos. They would dedicate minutes, if not almost an hour, of gameplay time to just cutscenes, which, you know, during that time period, there were no cutscenes. At this point, it really felt like a movie. Nowadays, that's a negative thing, but back then people would really actually advertise how much of the gameplay is cutscenes, and people enjoyed that. I'm not sure why, but they did. Probably because it was such a new thing, and honestly, this cutscene still holds up. I mean, it is so weird, so experimental, so strange and horrifying. It really brings this sort of anxiety to you, this strange feeling in your gut that something's just wrong, something's just beyond comprehension. It is something so very haunting, and it stays with you for the rest of your life. But of course, now this is the part where I ruin everything. This theory is not true, which is unfortunate or very fortunate depending on how you see it. Yeah, it just had to be spoiled by the man who produced the game himself, Yoshinori Kitase. This was taken by a surprisingly interesting interview conducted by Kotaku, where he pretty much debunks a ton of other theories, such as Squall is dead and the fact that you could revive Aerith. Yet, it is interesting to note that while Kitase's plan was never to imply that Squall is dead, he does actually think the theory is really interesting, and he implies that he might even take that idea into consideration should he ever remake the game again. So while the theory is dead, no pun intended, it's still both fun and very terrifying to think about. And it's all enhanced by the wonderful cutscenes found in Final Fantasy VIII. And who knows, maybe in the future we might see an FF8 remake that'll include an alternate ending, one that I believe would enhance the story tenfold. This is the sound you hear when something's gone wrong. It's the sound all of us heard when the clouds were gray and the rain starts pouring heavily. Sometimes it's the sound we hear before we're told that someone's gone missing, or perhaps someday it'll be the sound we hear before the nukes drop. As scary as that scenario is, the EAS, or the Emergency Alert System, was built to warn us of either ongoing situations or emergencies that were going to occur. When I was a kid, I usually hear the EAS go off when I skip school. See, back in the 90s and early 2000s, not a lot of people stayed home. Usually those who stayed home were kids ditching school, people who got injured at work, or house moms with nothing better to do. Obviously, this meant that this was the perfect time to test the EAS, and boy, did that ever make me regret skipping school. Why exactly did it even make that sound? What was the deal behind it? Well, interestingly enough, that horrible screech at the beginning of the alert is apparently digitized code called the digital header, and it's meant to communicate with the system what kind of threat they're in, what area it's affecting, and just how long the threat will last. The digital header is repeated 3 times in order for the system to catch any mistakes it might have made. The source of these broadcasts all come from different sources, yet once these sources find a reason to display a message and warn the people, it automates a message to that area affected. So, for example, one such source could be from the National Weather Service, and they suddenly find a tornado somewhere in, I don't know, North Carolina, Wake County. The system will then automate a message telling the EAS to make the message, then the EAS then screeches 3 times to make sure that the message is right, and well, basically, it just works the same way dial-up internet used to work back in the day, you know, when that was a thing. It's communicating back and forth between the source and the area. It's bad enough that I'm scared of tornadoes, but now I gotta listen to this banshee-like screech from a computer. And keep in mind, this sound is supposed to keep us safe and aware. Yeah, I'm aware alright, aware of the stains on my fucking underwear, asshole. Now of course, as horrifying as that sound is, nothing can compare to local access alerts, which is something a lot like emergency alert systems, only it was more local and was dealt with local authorities and anybody else who was currently in the position of power to alert the community. Local alert systems were soon replaced by emergency alert systems, but man, I feel for anybody who actually heard the local alert systems because these seem way more terrifying.
This is the 18th Wing Command Post. As of 1500 local, the 18th Wing Commander has declared tropical conditions storm watch for Okinawa.
Wow. Satan, is that you? You gotta keep in mind that even though the emergency alert system came out in 1997, local access alerts still helped everyone else that weren't affected by emergency alert systems. It didn't all come in at once. It had to be rolled out slowly, one by one in each city, and of course major cities had them first, as opposed to much smaller rural areas. But again, this sound worked largely in the same way emergency alert systems work. They're digital headers that told you info and communicated with the entire community what they needed to do in case of the emergency. Honestly, as fascinating as the digital header itself is, that never really stopped me from fearing what message the creepy voice had to say. It's always either a very muffled up man from nowhere telling you how you'll be dying this evening, or some robot with little to no empathy or remorse about however you're going to die. Pick your poison. Nowadays, I seldom ever hear this message on TV anymore, especially since, I don't really pay for TV. I think most of us don't. Although I still hear it, just on my cell phone. It's pretty much for the same reasons too. Bad weather, child gone missing, some other horrible disaster, and Jesus Christ, do kids go missing in North Carolina? Can I just mention that real quick? Like, while I was living there with my parents, oh god, as soon as I got my cell phone, that thing went off like every night about some other child going missing. What is with you people? What is there, a kids sale for Food Lion or something? Like what? Though it's not just to warn you of weather or missing kids, but it can also warn you of other disasters as well, though they're not as frequent. So I wouldn't worry about this sound being the last thing you hear anytime soon, though accidents can happen. As was shown in Hawaii one January morning in 2018, somehow the person who was supposed to test the emergency alert system accidentally clicked on the warn everyone that they're about to die from nuclear arms button. A common mistake. Though it doesn't have to be an accidental thing, sometimes the EAS can just go off for fun. Like that one time someone hacked into the EAS and warned everyone that there was a zombie invasion.
Civil authorities in your area have reported that the bodies of the dead are rising from their graves and attacking the living. Follow the messages on screen that will be updated as information becomes available. Do not attempt to approach or apprehend these bodies as they are considered extremely dangerous.
Boy, I'd feel bad for any snot-nosed brat that skipped school that day. Probably thought that shit was real. But hey, let's not forget, America isn't the only country in the world shitting their pants over this shit. All across the globe, people hear different types of screeching noises from their own personal emergency alert system. Whether or not they work similarly to America's is really unknown to me, but if I had to hazard a guess, probably. Either way, they're just as scary, if not worse, than America's EAS. Let's take a listen to a few of them, shall we?
Hello, John Sluter again from the Bureau with the latest situation on...
On toggle.
just heard the important message signal of the public warning system. There are two other signals of the public warning system, namely the alarm and all clear signals. The all clear signal is sounded when the threat is over and you can leave the shelter.
This is the Wartime Broadcasting Service. This country has been attacked with nuclear weapons. Communications have been severely disrupted, and the number of casualties and the extent of the damage are not yet known. We shall bring you further information as soon as possible. Meanwhile, stay tuned to this wavelength, stay calm, and stay in your own house. Remember, there's nothing to be gained by trying to get away. By leaving your homes, you could be exposing yourselves to greater danger. If you leave, you may find yourselves without food, without water, without accommodation, and without protection.
And of course, my absolute favorite one, the Russian EAS that just straight up flashes up and says warning while this horrible noise is just blasting through your TV screen.
2 метра в секунду.
Внимание! Говорит Главное управление МЧС России по Ульяновской области. Проводится техническая проверка системы централизованного оповещения населения.
These are all pretty bad. And I was actually going to end off by showing you Japan's EAS, which I felt was the most relaxing and calmest way to tell you you're gonna die. But then I found out that they have an infinitely scarier one, and yeah, take a listen.
緊急地震速報です。強い揺れに警戒してください。緊急地震速報です。強い揺れに警戒してください。
緊急地震速報です。福島県、宮城県、山形県、
Holy crap. Well, whether it's a zombie apocalypse or someone's kid getting snatched up, one thing's for certain. This sound is among the scariest sounds we'll ever hear. And if I had to argue, it's not just because it sounds scary, but let's face it, the message that it can bring sometimes is twice as scary than whatever sound it can make. Sometimes on Traumathon, I like to keep it simple. Sure, we can talk about, I don't know, the history of a serialized novel, or maybe we can talk about the reasons why a national broadcast system sounds so scary, or we can just sit here with a thumb up our asses and just talk about some actual scary shit that just happened one time in a video game. And that's exactly what we're going to do today. See, back in the early 2000s, Scooby-Doo was a big thing, and don't ask me why, I legit don't know why. The franchise has been around since the 70s, and somehow, through the magic of syndication, I guess, it grew into something even bigger with spin-off after spin-off, toys, movies, I don't know, maybe albums, if I'm pretty sure that existed. The 80s and 90s was a peak point of Scooby-Doo as multiple revivals came out of nowhere with a pup named Scooby-Doo, Scooby-Doo in the Ghoul School, Scooby-Doo and the Reluctant Werewolf, and Scooby Mania really just ramped up towards the end of the 90s when seemingly every single year a brand new Scooby-Doo animated movie would come out, all being pretty well animated and even being sometimes decent. Things haven't really changed nowadays, have they? I think every single year since the 2000s, there has been at least one feature-length animated Scooby-Doo movie, hasn't there? Though I do think the animation and the quality has definitely dipped down a bit. But going back to the early 2000s, everything exploded when Scooby-Doo had its very first live-action movie called Scooby-Doo and the Scooby-Doo. To be honest, I actually kind of enjoyed the film as a kid, and even now as an adult, I actually still think the movie's pretty charming. I mean, sure, fart jokes, the typical story, stupid CG. I mean, it's made for kids, not for the Oscars, but give it a fucking break. It knows what it is. I even rewatched it just recently, and really, I don't think it's that bad. I wouldn't even say that it's great, but if I'm ever in the mood, I wouldn't mind watching it again. Now, of course, with all this newfound marketability that Scooby-Doo had and suddenly garnered, and with the live-action film garnering over $275 million in the box office, it was a no-brainer to have a sequel to the film. And a sequel there was, Scooby-Doo 2: Monsters Unleashed. Of course, with any film with a seemingly endless potential of financial gain, promotional material has to be made. Sure, we had the Burger King kids meal toys and the bad video game or two, but the one I want to talk about tonight is of course the point-and-click flash game known as Scooby-Doo Escape from the Coolzanian. The main point of the game is to get you to watch the movie. Help Scooby-Doo Escape from the Coolsville Museum. I don't know why I'm having such a hard time saying that. I've actually recorded this 30 times now. Coolsville. I don't know why I'm saying Coolsville. What the hell's wrong with me? What, you got a fucking dick in your mouth? It's a simple game that has a few brain teasers here and there, as seen in most popular point-and-click games. Not many people talk about it because, well, what is there to talk about, really? Well, there is one thing that we can talk about, and it's something I think is unnecessarily creepy, and honestly, kind of fucked up. See, after you're done solving your first room of the game, you're taken to a room with ancient Egyptian motif called the Mummy Archives. As you solve puzzles between the two rooms separated by the sarcophagus room, you will eventually stumble upon a crowbar. See, without the crowbar, you're unable to open the sarcophagus in the center of the room. And up until now, you're pretty much told that everything you click has some meaning, some clue to help you to get by the level. So, of course, logic stands to reason that if you use the crowbar on the sarcophagus, it's likely to have a clue or a puzzle piece to help you advance to the next room, right? Well, here's what happens when you actually open the sarcophagus. Wow. Holy shit, that's fucked up. Like I said, the game thus far made you trust it, made you think that everything you picked up was part of the game and it was part of solving the entire thing, and it's needed to move on. Not this though, there's really no purpose for this crowbar, this sarcophagus, like at all. It's all just a huge red herring. What's even more messed up is the fact that they really play up to the atmosphere of this scare. The music goes totally quiet. All you can hear is the scribbling from the writing that's appearing before you. As the message is being sprawled out, you get a pretty creepy vibe from it all. It's so totally dark. All you can hear is the scribbling on the wall, and the message itself is kind of creepy when you actually read it, warning you about this creature following right behind you. But by the time the message gets to the end, it's too late. Keep in mind too, this is a Scooby-Doo game. Scooby-Doo isn't really scary. I mean, sure, it can be for babies, and some of the monsters are kind of creepy. Though for the 99% of the human population that isn't scared of Scooby-Doo, your guard is totally down. Like, nobody really expects a jump scare from a Scooby-Doo game. It's the last thing on your mind, and then bam, you get hit with this horrible apparition. This face comes up half a second after the last word is written too, and it's pretty devious when you think about it. Look how small this text is. And sure, it's legible from where you're sitting, but keep in mind, this is how the game actually looked on most monitors back in 2004, so you really had to get up close to read it back then. when it was being written. The message goes away so fast and you might even think that you must have missed a clue, right? After all, the game hasn't given you a red herring before, so why would it do so now? So you check again, preparing yourself for that jump scare, enduring that hellish scream and that ghoulish face, all for the sake of beating this game, only to find out the message really doesn't have any meaning whatsoever. It's just nothing at all. Before you can even conceive that info though, this horrible white mummy thing, I don't know what the hell to call it, comes up and scares the ever-living shit out of you for the second time. I gotta admit, it's a good scare, albeit cheap. For some of you, this might be your very first jump scare ever, and for that, you really have my sympathy. It's odd to say, but this Scooby-Doo Flash game has probably one of the most effective and the most terrifying jump scare ever seen in a Flash game. Oh yeah, and by the way, one more thing. Does anybody want me to cover Zombie Island? I kind of mentioned it briefly, and I really liked that movie a lot as a kid, and it really spooked me too when I was a child. I know I'm not alone on that either, but a lot of people already have talked about Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island, so I'm wondering if you guys want to hear me talk about it too. Let me know in the comments. Imagine this, if you will. One night, just summer's eve, you're having a ton of fun with your console, playing Smash Brothers or maybe some other Nintendo 64 game, or maybe even PS1. You're just sitting there having the time of your life when suddenly someone or something kicks your console by accident, or maybe they trip over the wire, and without you really fully understanding what happened, the screen corrupts and does a bunch of weird shit that freaks you out so much that you run over the console and unplug it, thinking the evil was contained within the console, whatever was trying to get out. Well, hopefully you didn't do that, because that just sounds like something a caveman would do, aka me, because that's exactly what happened to me as a kid while I was playing Smash Brothers on the Nintendo 64. Everything was corrupted, and the noise the TV was making was just hellish and sounded like infinite digital screams. Ugh, I hated it. But stuff like that can happen sometimes in games or consoles, mainly due to an error from the game, or perhaps an error from the console itself. Or maybe you bought an illegal version of the game and the console itself is just trying to punish you for trying to feed it garbage. There are a multitude of reasons why these, what I call kill screens, happen. The term kill screen isn't really an official one, but it's one I heard a lot as a QA tester back when I used to do quality assurance for games. Kill screens can happen, like I said, when something isn't functioning right. And if you ever hear your game make this noise, that means there is a critical error that could be potentially damaging your system. So I was advised to unplug the console I was working at whenever that happened. And I'm not sure if I can advise that with you, because keep in mind I was working with current gen consoles when I was a QA tester, so maybe that advice doesn't really work with everything, and these were American machines, so, you know, take that with a grain of salt. I was just told to do that. Thankfully, that rarely happens with most games nowadays, thanks to how advanced technology is now. But even with all our advancements, that shit can still happen. And I want to focus on that weird and scary stuff that happens with game consoles, you know, the scary sounds that they used to make, as well as the various kill screens, error screens, and boot up screens that haunted us in our youth. Because honestly, it's a bit of a hobby of mine to check out some of the freaky shit that these consoles or games do sometimes even in secret. Now, unfortunately, the topic of today was a bit too much, especially since what I'll be talking about tonight has a ton of info on it that is basically needed for a video on its own, so I decided to cut this video up in 2 separate pieces. Hopefully you guys watch both, and hopefully you enjoy each one. Okay, with that being said, let's talk about the wonderful yet equally horrible boot up screen that is the PlayStation. Good God, I hated the PS1 boot up sound so much. Even now as an adult, that shit still gives me the creeps. I never understood why people always said that it was so nostalgic and calming for them. Like, I get it, it's nostalgic, but I mean, the sound that I always heard from THX's horrible intro was always nostalgic to me too, but I still hate that thing. Though there is something about the BIOS that I found super interesting while I was looking into it. See, it's interesting because there are two unique and somewhat secretive sounds that the PS1 plays as it boots up a game that either is pirated or corrupted. I never knew about this until I started researching for this video, and these two sounds, I'm not even joking, are called Fearful Harmony and Personified Fear. But why? Who would name it this? Well, I gotta give props to whoever named it that, because the sounds these two make are pretty horrible, and that's no hyperbole. The names are appropriate for the sound that they are attached to. Take a listen to Fearful Harmony, which plays when you have a bootleg or pirated disc or a modded console. Yeah, no, seriously, I'm not joking. I legit would have just thrown out my console if I heard that. Seriously, that is a haunted piece of hardware right there. I ain't dealing with that. But to be more technical, the PS1 is essentially trying its best to read whatever you have inserted it, but the BIOS is failing miserably, making the entire console lag terribly and making the chimes seem much slower than they usually are. There's some speculation as to why exactly Fearful Harmony plays when the console tries to read corrupted data. You know, aside from creeping out kids and making them ever regret modding or pirating games. But apparently, in Japanese culture, strong winds carry evil spirits and disease, so it is believed. So having wind chimes help ward off these negative energies from your home. In a way, the PS1 is playing these sounds in an attempt to protect you from dark and malevolent energies. It might be a bit of a stretch, but I thought that was an interesting enough tidbit that I wanted to mention it. Though most talk and speculation around Fearful Harmony is just that, talk and speculation. Nobody really knows why this sound plays, but others really suggest that it's just the main sound, the boot up sound that is, but just stretched on over. Remember, I did say the boot up was very laggy, so it's playing the same animation that it should, but it's very, very slow, and you can see that in some of the videos that have Fearful Harmony. And of course, we can't forget about the little brother of Fearful Harmony, known as Personified Fear. Seriously, I cannot emphasize how weird these names really are. By the way, just to clarify, Fearful Harmony and Personified Fear, these aren't official names given to the files or whatever audio is playing. It's just fan-made names given to these sounds, but still, whoever came up with it, kind of a dick. Anyways, Personified Fear plays only when there's an error reading the disc. The screen goes to black and plays a pretty spooky sound. I hear this one is supposedly a rare sound to hear, but I call bull on that. There's a ton of kids who had these in the 90s, and for the most of us, it was our first disc-based console, meaning most of us probably smudged or scratched our discs because we were idiot kids who didn't really know any better. Seriously, raise your hand if you tried to put your PS1 disc inside of a CD player. I know some of you did that. It's kind of interesting when you really think about it. I like to consider the PS1 a pioneer of horror games, you know? A ton, and I mean a ton of horror classics came straight from the PS1, if not found their footing with the PS1. It's kind of hard to believe that the console that was innovating fear and horror in video games also had its deep, dark secrets with these horrifying sounds that I don't think any of us as kids would ever want to hear. Today we'll be looking at a few spooky error screens from past games and maybe a few screens in general that were just straight up terrifying but in no way related to an error. This is sort of a continuation from the video we did yesterday, so if you want to check that out, just click on the link on the top right. Alright, let's start this video off with every single 6th generation console. And by that, of course, I mean GameCube, PS2, and Xbox. First, let's talk about the GameCube. I actually really didn't like the GameCube startup. I mean, sure, the classic little xylophone and stupid little Easter egg sounds, yeah, sure, charming. But whenever you had a disc error or no disc at all, it did this whole rotation thing and it was really scary with the string sounds or something. I don't know what it is, but that sound just always freaked me out. It didn't really help that it was followed by this weird ambient music, which I know when sped up is supposed to be some Easter egg that's supposed to be referencing the Famicom, but that doesn't really matter to me because keep in mind, this was around the 2000s where literally nobody knew about that at all. To us kids, it was just a weird, eerie sound, and it's just kind of off-putting. It also didn't help when you tried playing with the Game Boy player with no game inserted. It also gave you this really punishing and kind of horrible sound. Whoa, Jesus, calm down. I forgot. My God, you don't need to make me shit myself. This is like the equivalent of your dad yelling at you for fucking up. I mean, what do you expect? I'm a kid. Then, of course, we have the PlayStation consoles. I already covered the PS1 yesterday with Fearful Harmony and Personified Fear. Yeah, they're pretty bad sounds, but the PS2 isn't much better. And it still has that horrifying, ear-shattering sound that's just way too loud for comfort. Yeah, seriously, how many of you tried to sneak into your living room or into your bedroom with your TV on and you tried to play some like PS2 games around 10 or 11 p.m. around your bedtime, and then that sound just blares right in front of your screen and it's just like, oh, great, now everyone in the neighborhood knows that I'm a liar. What makes it worse is when you have a disc inserted to the PS2 that isn't a PS2 game. It gives you this real ominous blood red screen known as the red screen of death. It's so eerie and weird, and keep in mind, a lot of us kids played with the lights off, and we ain't even have that stupid strip lights literally everyone on TikTok has nowadays. We just sort of let the screen bask us in its light, but seeing this in the middle of the dark, I mean, that must have been terrifying. Granted, the PS2 isn't so bad when compared to the previous iteration, but it can still be pretty spooky. They also don't have any equivalent to the Personified Fear or Fearful Harmony sounds, thank God, though the BIOS can get corrupted and play otherworldly sounds. Really, any BIOS from any console can corrupt and make horrible sounds, and if I did a video on that, then it lasts for hours, so let's just move on. And of course, you can't forget the Xbox boot up. You know, honestly, I never really found the Xbox boot up to be all that scary, though I hear a lot of people get scared and hated seeing the Xbox boot up whenever it turned on. I personally really like the boot up a lot. I guess in a way this is like how some people really like the PS1 and PS2 startup, saying that it's very calming and relaxing, while others just think it's really creepy and weird, like me. I personally always really enjoy the bubbly reactor core and how it explodes. It's just so cool. I also hear that there's an Easter egg with the startup screen that hasn't even been discovered yet, so that'll be cool to find out, if we ever find out. Though Xbox doesn't really seem to have a kill screen or error screen that was just as spine-tingling like its colleagues, but there are some creepy sounds that can be found deep within the console. Well, I mean, as deep as the main menu of the console goes. See, in the background of the BIOS screen, you can hear all these weird, funky noises playing in the background. According to Microsoft, this was implemented into the ambience of the menu screen in order to give off the impression that the Xbox was an otherworldly device, unlike anything we've seen before. Yet for a lot of people, these sounds were super eerie and unsettling. I mean, really, take a listen. Again, I gotta interject by saying I really never thought these sounds were even scary at all. I actually dig these sounds and I get a huge wave of nostalgia myself. Polar opposite reaction to the PS1 and PS2, I know, but I grew up with the Xbox and GameCube. I guess my bias is in play here. For me, it felt very homey and very spacious, like I really am in another world. I don't know how to explain it, but that's just how it is. But I totally can see how you can find it creepy or eerie, especially if you didn't grow up with these consoles. During the next generation though, boot up screens were way quieter and calmer, so I doubt anyone really was creeped out by any of this, nor have I ever heard of anyone being scared of the Wii's, the PS3, or the Xbox 360's boot up, so why don't we just go back a bit further into the past, back to the days where Sega had some sort of weird fetish for creepy shit. Okay, so you might know where I'm going with this. Yep, the Sega CD error sound. If you don't know what that is, or what I'm talking about, well, refer back to when I was talking about how most kids were idiots when it came to CDs. See, Sega knew this, and when they created the Sega CD, they wanted to ensure that kids weren't fiddling around with their games by putting it into boomboxes or car radios or CD players by playing this horrifying message.
Warning, this disc is for use with the Sega CD system only. This disc contains CD-ROM data and is not for audio use. Please press stop on your disc player now. This disc contains CD-ROM data that may damage your audio system. Please stop playing this disc immediately.
Yeah, I really just don't get it. Like, seriously, was that necessary? I guess in the same vein that the EAS alarms were supposed to keep you alert and aware, this is supposed to jolt you back into your dumb 10-year-old senses and not put CDs into the wrong devices. But at the same time, was that wacky guitar solo in the background really necessary? And keep in mind, the 90s kind of sent you mixed messages about what to do with video game discs. Sega hated the ideas of kids just fucking around with their games, so they put that scary warning into any radio or the audio of the game disc whenever you try putting it into some sort of audio player. But consoles like PS1 and even the Dreamcast sometimes offered some pretty cool Easter eggs or bonus soundtracks that are otherwise not found in the game.
As you can see, this is a PlayStation Black Disc. Cut number 1 contains computer data, so please don't play it. But you probably won't listen to me anyway, will you?
Minute. What do you think you're doing? This is a Dreamcast disc.
There is game data on track 1, so please don't use this disc in a normal CD player.
We can't save the world from a CD player, so just put us back in the Dreamcast so we can do our job.
So that's pretty cool, but don't fuck with Sega. They hate that shit. Although to be fair, if you're actually morbidly curious about what happens when you play a CD on track 1 and it's a video game CD, well, this happens. Yeah, I don't even know which one's worse, the Sega CD one or the horrible screeching cryptid screaming. Maybe I'll take the warning over the screaming any day, though depending on who you asked, that's not nearly as creepy as what Sega did with Sonic CD. Everyone knows about this, but if you don't really know why there's creepy Japanese text with a creepy old Sonic in the background and creepy music playing, well, essentially when Sonic CD came out, the devs decided to have a bit of fun by adding in the secret sound test. Pretty much every game in the 90s had a secret sound test hidden in the game, and I'm not really sure why it was hidden. I heard somewhere it was to test the audio and whether or not the music played correctly. I mean, hence the phrase sound test, sure, of course. But I really think that it was just a way for the devs to enjoy some of the tunes while they programmed the levels and everything like that. Though this sound test found in Sonic CD was a bit different from the rest, as it's hidden away a few secrets within this secret. See, if you input certain values on the sound test, you'll get access to a few cute and funny images, and I heard some people were creeped out by this one image right here. That's sort of like a weird tribute to Batman, but I always thought it was kind of funny just to see Sonic all buffed up and dark and gritty like Batman. Yeah, I don't know, it's just kind of funny to me. But then of course we have this. When translated, the text in Japanese says, "Fun is infinite with Sega Enterprises, Madzin or Majin." Majin is the nickname of Masato Nishimura, one of the landscape designers for the game. Now, I'm not really sure if his intent was to creep out little kids, but if it wasn't, he did a terrible job. Now, I've actually been told about this screen, and it was supposedly a sort of anti-piracy measure, and that's something that I've been hearing since last year's Traumathon, but I've never really found any evidence of this being true. I've always heard about this being just a creepy little Easter egg ever since 10 years ago. It's only just recently that I've been hearing people say that it's an anti-piracy image, which probably has to do with the fact that it's just sort of a niche group of people who love making creepy anti-piracy fakes. Now that might seem like a good segue over to the next stuff that I wanted to talk about, which was anti-piracy screens, which there are plenty of them, and ever since last year, thanks to your guys' help and my research, I've actually found way more that are way creepier. But unfortunately, I think I'm gonna have to end it here. There is going to be another anti-piracy this year in Traumathon, but I think if I were to add those, oh man, this video would be way longer than I really wanted it to be. So I think I'm just gonna end it here for now. I know, there's a ton more spooky kill screens and boot up error screens that I haven't even mentioned quite yet, but I'd figure with most of them, I'd want to save for future Traumathon videos, like game over screens. Yes, I'll talk about the Diddy Kong scary game over screen soon, but this video has gone on for too long. Let me know if there's any spooky kill screens or any other sort of boot up screen or error screen that I missed, because you can bet on seeing them later on in this month. We're only a quarter of the way there, folks. We got a ton more spooky trauma to go through. By now, most of you must have seen my Goosebumps video for Traumathon. If you haven't, go ahead and watch it by clicking on the top right of the screen or just by looking it up. I really liked that video, but honestly, it didn't start off as a Goosebumps video, but rather as a frame of reference for the other thing that I really wanted to talk about. See, apparently over in the UK, only the first season of Goosebumps was ever released to VHS, with some of the episodes actually missing. I'm not really sure if this is true or not, but I'm having a difficult time finding out any sort of info on this. What I do know is true is that the original 32 books didn't even feature any of Tim Jacobus's artwork. That's just sad. If only the UK had their own special little niche of horror made specifically for kids, something made with that old British charm they're so well known for. Hey, wait, what's that? Why, it's Grisly Tales for Gruesome Kids, a book series made in 1990 preceding Goosebumps by 2 whole years. Known commonly as just Grisly Tales, It was a series of books written by Jamie Ricks that served as cautionary tales for naughty children. The very first book featured 15 stories, all of which ended with some bastard kid getting what he or she deserved. Much like Goosebumps, Grizzly Tales also aired on TV, airing around the year 2000 and ending in 2006. Now, to be fair, while both of these series focus on horror for younger demographics, the similarities really end there. In fact, I would argue that Grizzly Tales isn't really horror, just kind of shock humor in some way. Also, unlike Goosebumps, which was live action, Grizzly Tales was animated in two parts, one in stop motion and the other hand drawn. Secondly, where Goosebumps focused more on one horror story per issue, Grizzly Tales focused on several smaller cautionary tales that were much more whimsical and almost fairy tale-esque. Well, I mean, as whimsical as cutting some poor asshole's tongue off just because he's too much of a smart-ass kid. Yeah, no, you heard that right. There's a story where a barber cuts the tongues off of naughty little smart-ass kids for talking too much to their parents or their teachers or something. There's also one where a kid is burned alive in a stove oven because he was watching too much telly, as the Brits would call it. Hell, some poor kid actually gets murdered. Yeah, it's fucking brutal, but they don't call it Grizzly Tales from Gruesome Kids for nothing. I gotta say though, even though I just learned about this show last year because I really wanted to talk about it last year but couldn't because I ran out of time, I'm actually kind of a fan of this show's format. Each episode is about 10 minutes long, and before you get into watching the actual story, the episode starts off with a small stop-motion segment that sort of serves as a framing device for the real stories being told. This segment featured an old man known as the Squeam Scream Caretaker, named after the theater that he's in, or you could just call him Uncle Grizzly, which apparently is his real name, and his pet spider named Spindleshanks. Uncle Grizzly acts as a sort of correctional figure, giving the audience morals and life lessons, all while acting like a massive prick towards his spider and being overall creepy. He also serves as the narrator, and man does Nigel Planer do a wonderful job in this show. Apparently Nigel Planer did quite a lot of theater before working on film and television, and it really shows. His narrations are so theatrical and have so much weight and feeling behind each and every word. I can't help but hang on every word Uncle Grizzly says.
Pies don't just make themselves, you know. There's the filling, pastry, and the thumbs. Well, go on then. Have one last big suck before you give it up forever. Oops! Not that big, you stupid spider! You've sucked all your fur off!
He also kind of sounds like Guru Larry, and that's a plus in my books. The second half of this episode was, of course, the actual story, all of which came from the Grizzly Tales series, and I gotta be honest, as much as I think this show is entertaining, I kind of wish they stuck with the stop motion animation, because this, it looks like shit. And understand, I totally know why they had to do that. Stop motion animation is very time consuming and very expensive at times, so there's no way they could ever make a series out of that. And don't get me wrong, I think in some ways it strangely fits the creepy and weird aesthetic this show was going for, but I still feel like they could have pulled off this ugly look much better and way more aesthetic. Some of these shots just look so weird and jagged, sometimes just straight up looking kind of bland and lifeless. They later on moved the format from traditional animation to Adobe Flash, which, oh my fucking god, Jesus Christ. I'm so sorry about what I said earlier. Just please, just can we take it back to the older style? Please, this is so, oh my god, it's so soulless. It's like I'm watching the Progressive commercial, only with like less ass to keep me from being bored. Good God save the Queen. Well, that's what happens when you gotta save money. The stop motion sections also unfortunately stopped later on in the series with this transition to a much more soulless CG setting. And don't get me wrong, I love me some CG animation, but this wasn't really on par with what was going on in the 2000s. Man, how are you guys gonna get one up by Cubics of all things? That show looked like ass, but at least it had energy to at least compensate for some of its shit. Thankfully, Nigel Planer keeps his role as the narrator, now known as the Night Night Porter, and he's just as fun as when he first started off the series.
I haven't changed my underpants in 20 years. That's why I crunch when I walk. Listen.
The quality of the stories also vary from episode to episode, regardless of which animation style was used. Some are pretty ridiculous and kind of confusing, like I don't know if this is a specific UK thing or what. Others are pretty brutal and sometimes real mean-spirited. Though what I can say with Grizzly Tales as opposed to Goosebumps is that this show actually holds up. Goosebumps can sometimes be frustrating to watch, with some pretty annoying camera angles and awkward dialogue, but this show, animation aside, has pretty neat stories that only last around 10 minutes long, so it's not like a huge dedication of your time. Whether or not you agree with me, I'd still implore you, my United States brethren, to check out this series whenever you can. Most, if not all of it, is still on YouTube, so there's really no excuse not to watch them. Just be careful. Some of these grisly tales may just be about you someday. Possibly one of the greatest, if not most fascinating indie horrors ever made, Yume Nikki. I'll probably keep this short just because I think everyone and their grandmother has already had their say about this game, and so there's really not much I can add, but this game is just a classic. It's really hard to believe that this game was made 16 years ago. Yes, 16 years ago. Cave Story came out just about a few months later. I mean, that's crazy, really. So what is Yume Nikki, and why is it such a big deal? Well, to ask what Yume Nikki is kind of a tricky question. It's a game where you play as a hikikomori named Marotsuki. Hikikomoris in Japan are basically shut-ins. They pursue a life of extreme isolation, rarely ever talking to anyone outside their rooms and pretty much never leaving. The reason I mention this is because that's just who Marotsuki is, a young girl with major issues leaving her room, and while we explore her dreams, we can get a glimpse as to why she's like this and possibly some of the things she suffered through. See, the whole game takes place inside her head, never once revealing who her parents are or why exactly she's like this. There are 12 doors that lead to a multitude of worlds, but they're not necessarily levels. To say one door leads to, like, the ice level or the fire level would be egregious, mainly due to the fact that while one door might lead to a place where it rains all the time, that does not mean this world's theme is just rain. Rather, this room's theme is rain, because before you know it, you might find a different door within this room that'll lead you to some blood red maze full of creepy girls or a room full of cubes. Yeah, these rooms don't really make sense, like, at all, but why would they? You're in a dream after all. Rhyme or reason is not something dreams are known to portray, but what is portrayed in these rooms can sometimes lead into something deeper, perhaps even something darker. First and foremost, you have to keep in mind that there is no dialogue in this game whatsoever. There's never once a cutscene where Marotsuki gets called fat or taunted or anything like that. You just have these images and these strange events to interpret from, but even then, none of these has ever been confirmed to be true at all. Still, what's there is still very interesting. Among one of the most interesting rooms belongs to Uboo, a strange black creature with a white face, and yes, he is basically the inspiration for every indie game using a black figure with a white face as a creepy unknown villain, but more than that is the symbolic nature behind him. See, he hides behind this little ice hut under the guise of a girl with blonde hair. If you turn the light off, you have a chance of encountering him, yet it takes some time as it's a very low chance. And you can't just switch it on and off, you have to leave and come back in and then turn it off. Once you're able to summon him though, a very scary sound drones in the background that kind of shocks you to your senses. If you interact with him, you're stuck in this plane of reality where this strange monster is just groping on these weird looking mountains as it vomits blood. And yes, the mountains do kind of look like breasts, maybe? This leads into the theory that Marotsuki might have been coerced into sexual deeds without consent. It's an unfortunate theory that does have some legs, as many people point out the uterus hallways that look super distorted and are really scary looking, as well as the phallic monster that hides behind this wall, smiling at you, groping this handrail. Ugh. And of course, when you reach the top of the stairs and enter the room, you're given this horrifying face that pulses at you, possibly symbolizing the terrifying nature of her assaulter. It's a very unfortunate and uncomfortable theory, and it really does have some credence behind it, but I'm not so inclined just to say yet that this is what the game is all about. See, to me, Yume Nikki is more than just a game of exploration. It's a goal, journeying deep into Madatsuki's mind and finding out so much about her. To me, yes, there is a hint of sexual assault there, but I personally view this as a sort of fear that she has within herself, more so than it is a sexual assault theory. When you delve deep into her mind, you see all these insecurities within her, and some creatures that only enhance her anxiety about the outside world. Creatures like the Tengu girls, who just hang around with each other, yet hate being with her. As soon as you touch one of these girls in their frenzy state, you're transported to a dead-end zone. To me, these symbolize the bullies she had to deal with or still currently deals with in school, and the uterus to me always symbolized the horrors of change she's facing as a teenager growing up. Her body is doing strange new things and she's scared of growing up. You can even see this while she's in her Famicom world, all these references to video games, particularly in Earthbound, showing how much of a gamer she is, and it being a world she can escape to. Then again, if she can't escape from the real world through games, she can escape the real world, literally, well, in her dreams at least, as she can befriend this one alien that takes her off planet and crash lands on Mars. It's one of the game's most charming events, and to me, it always symbolized her friends online, or maybe a pen pal she has. Her crash landing on Mars is really just her wanting to leave her room and being somewhere else, just somewhere more exotic, stranger, and new. It's why she chose Mars in her dreams, because it's barren, but it's a fertile land full of possibilities. The effects can also show off who she portrays herself as. The long hair effect shows who she once was, and the blonde hair shows who she wants to be, as in Japan, some people believe the idealistic beauty comes with more Western features, like blonde hair. Her fat appearance and her midget appearance could reflect of how other people view her, like her bullies, seeing her as someone who's short and pudgy. There are eyes and hands everywhere in this game, indicating her sense of anxiety, always being watched, and the avoidance of being touched by anyone, or perhaps avoiding to be intimate with people. And of course, we can't forget Monoko and the possible accident that happened with her. She's a little girl that changes appearance once you use the traffic light effect. She turns into this deformed thing with several arms poking out of her, possibly symbolizing bones coming out of her. And it's believed by many that this also symbolizes a horrible car accident that she had with this girl. And the fact that she has a name implies that this girl was a good friend, or maybe only a friend of Matsuki. Whether she was responsible for it or not is unknown. There's so much more, so goddamn much more. But if I talked about everything, I'd honestly be here for possibly hours. I'd love to get into them all, but I'm really running out of time here. I will say though, I am a little tired of people only remembering this game for the quote-unquote sexual assault theories. It's like, sure, you can interpret that for some of these, I guess, but I really don't think that this is the only thing this game should be remembered for, nor should it be the only worthwhile theory that should stick with you. There's a lot more to this game than meets the eye. Hell, I've heard some people theorize that the whole game takes place after a horrible alien invasion occurs, and that's why Madatsuki sees all this weird shit. It all depends on your viewpoint, your interpretation, and the beautiful thing about Yume Nikki is that you're not wrong with any of your theories. The developer of this game has kept their mouth shut about theories and confirmations on theories. Really, it's up to you. If you can dream it, it's possible. Now, of course, I can't end this video off without mentioning the, well, elephant in the room. Yeah, the new Yume Nikki games. Are they worth it? Well, I've never played them before, but honestly, I can't really see how they are. The original will always be a classic to me, and from what I've heard and what I've seen with the new game, I mean, it just doesn't look very appealing, despite the original creator being on board with it. Though, if you're already playing through Yume Nikki and you're craving for more, I'd suggest checking out Yume Tuki. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I haven't played it myself, but a lot of fans attest to its quality. Many say it's a lovingly crafted and well-made sequel with a ton of respect to the original, so I'd say give the game a shot. Just remember, it all started here. This one game, this one dream, this one thing that kept us all invested. It's always there, and it will always be there. It will always be remembered as one of the greatest indie games of all time. Silent Hill 2 is without a question a masterpiece. There is no doubt in my mind that it is. And before anyone brings up the awkward dialogue delivery or the bad controls or the graphics, whatever, in my opinion, a masterpiece does not equate perfection in all aspects. To me, a masterpiece is a piece of work that has an impact on the genre, the medium, and the people who consume the craft. I think Silent Hill 2 covers this in spades. There was no other game like it, and anybody who tries nowadays is only a pale imitator. And if you still question my definition of masterpiece, keep in mind Ocarina of Time, largely considered a masterpiece by many, was at the time questioned by some as to whether or not it is a masterpiece just because it didn't have voice acting.
Yeah, he called me into his office and basically just tried to poke holes in it over and over again in a way that at the time I thought was actually really frustrating because he was saying like, this game doesn't have voice acting. How can you say the sound's a 10? This is when we were scoring on component scores.
So it was, what was this?
This was graphics, gameplay, sound, value, and reviewer's tilt. And so he just sat there and kind of poked holes like, wouldn't it be better if it had voice acting? Wouldn't it be better if it had this? And I was like, well, the standards of the console, all this other stuff, like if these are the policies that we review by, absolutely not. This is a sound 10 all the way. And he kind of grilled me on it for a while, and then at the end of it went, all right, if that's what you want to do, which was actually the worst thing he could have said. Like, fuck, God damn it.
The way we view these mediums change, but I believe the impact they make speaks in volumes than how they age. I really adore Silent Hill 2 and I'll sing its praise forever, yet there's one aspect of the game that I truly wish to focus on, and that is the monster design. See, Silent Hill monster designs have always been stellar. Well, I mean, most of the time. Each monster has a purpose, and they aren't just made just for gameplay mechanics, or just to be creepy for creepy's sake. They were created as an antithesis of the main character, sometimes acting as a distorted mirror into the main character's psyche. In Silent Hill 2's case, it's reflective of James Sunderland. Do keep in mind that a lot of these monsters are in a way spoilers to Silent Hill 2's story, so I really recommend playing the game first and beating it and returning back to this game, but I'm pretty sure most of you aren't going to do that, or you've already played the game. And, well, if you don't want to, that's fine, but I just really love this game, and I think everyone should really give it a shot. Anyways, I warned you, so let's start off with the Bubblehead Nurse, possibly one of the most famous monsters in Silent Hill history, right behind Pyramid Head, and don't worry, we'll get to him soon. To back it up a bit, for those who don't know Silent Hill 2's story, it's about a man named James who had recently lost his wife Mary to an illness, or so he thought. Things changed when he received a letter from her saying she'll wait at their special place in Silent Hill. It's a very short summary, but that pretty much kicks off the whole story, and the reason you need to understand this is because James had to deal with Mary as she lay dying. When people know that they're about to die, their moods shift, they don't become themselves anymore, and they lash out at the people closest to them and hurting them the most. It's around this time that during her illness, it's believed James had an affair with Mary. Now, it's only a theory, and there's pretty much no flat-out admission of guilt, but there are the nurses and some other monsters. The nurses, aside from being very, very terrifying, are also scantily clad and rather erotically designed, and trust me, this isn't just because they're good for selling merch, it's due to how James Sunderland felt during his wife's illness. Again, it's believed that James had an affair, and what other person is there to have an affair with than the homebound nurse, who's most likely younger, more attractive, and if not that, then they're at least less sickly looking than his dying wife. People debate whether or not James slept with the nurses, and I personally believe he didn't. I just think the man really wanted to have sex with, well, pretty much with anyone, honestly. It just so happens that the nurses were readily available right there for his imagination to go gaga, and While it's not as fucked up as actually cheating on his dying wife, it's still a messed up thing to think about and to make anyone really feel guilty. Like, that's your only thing on your mind, sex, while your like wife is dying? Come on, man. Though the outward appearance of these nurses likely contribute to how Mary looked. She's ill, sick, looking deathly pale and constantly in pain, much like the bobblehead nurses who are constantly twitching, groaning out of pain. It's sort of a hybrid between his wife and the real nurses. It's the main reason why the bubblehead nurses have bubble heads. They're bandaged up to look like nobody because to James, they were nobody. Just beautiful women he wishes he could be with instead of his angry, sick wife. Though, if we want to personify his wife in a more brutal, disgusting rendition, then look no further than Lying Figures. These are just the manifestation of Mary Sutherland. She once stated that she looked like a monster, and in a way, this is her own dark reflection of herself and how James felt about her during this time. This is the monster of terminal illness, the most corrupt form of a human dying. The way that creature has its arms restrained is symbolic of how Mary felt trapped in her own body, and James's frustration of being unable to hold her or reach out to help her. The way they spit out acid could be indicative of how toxic she was towards James during her illness. It can also reflect just how much she vomited during her sickness. The zippers on their head could reflect of how James wanted his wife to just zip it up or shut up whenever she spoke so harshly towards him. Of course, not every monster is based on James's fear. Silent Hill is also a reflection of everyone's sins and fears, and the abstract daddy just so happens to be Angela's greatest demon. It's a monster that merged itself with another creature, and when you look on top, it almost looks like the first half of the monster is bent over on top of the other half of the creature, which is constantly screaming. I think we all know what this symbolizes, what with the phallic mouth and the bondage between the two creatures and the agony of the body creature. It's very sexual looking, and yeah. Even the room the monster resides in is such a huge phallic representation of what the abstract daddy is. I mean, it's in the name itself, abstract daddy. Ugh. The room is textured as if it were the inside of a womb or a uterus, and there are multiple phallic objects going in and out of the room. It's really horrifying, especially when you consider the demonetization symbolism. Fun fact, this is the only time you would have had to fought the abstract daddy, as it was just Angela's dark demon. It wouldn't really have made sense if James had to fight them, yet you fight a ton of them during the last part of the game when you're in the hotel. It really makes no sense, like, at all. When asked about this, the monster designer of the game, Masahiro Ito, said that it wasn't supposed to happen, yet when he was asked why it did happen, he just replied with, "It's the game." Cool. And of course, who can forget Pyramid Head? Oh, the symbolism he carries. Obviously one of Silent Hill's most iconic characters, also one of the most overused and overmarketed to the point where he really has no meaning anymore. But that of course wasn't always the case. See, in Silent Hill 2, Pyramid Head is the very definition of James's guilt and inner turmoil. Again, if you don't want the game spoiled, this is your last chance. I'll give you 10 seconds. Okay, good? Well, anyways, James fucking murders his wife, and it's weighing on him so much that it burdens him, and it's manifested through this massive butcher knife that he struggles to carry around but refuses to let go because it symbolizes how he really wants to fucking off himself because of all the guilt. It's also interesting to note that Pyramid Head is a sort of bizarre version of an executioner, and according to the lore, Silent Hill was a town where executioners were frequent. So frequent, in fact, that most families were either friends with executioners or had relatives as executioners. This is, of course, going back to the motif of him being a sort of reminder of James of his past guilt. He even goes so far as to abuse other monsters both sexually and murderously. This is meant to both represent the themes of death and sex that is so heavily implied throughout the entirety of Silent Hill 2, and to show James's violent nature towards his own wife and to himself. Oh, and also there's a bunch of Pyramid Heads, not just one. And I'm not talking about the ones, the other Silent Hills where he's just like there for no reason. Oh god, that shit makes me sad. Now, I can go on and on and on and on about a lot of these monsters, and I know for a fact there are so many more that I've yet to touch, and even symbolism that I haven't even mentioned yet. But I either left them out because they're just different versions of James's sexual frustration or his abuse towards his wife, and vice versa, or because their designs weren't really as interesting as I thought they were. That's not to say they aren't fascinating, it's just that we've got other things to cover here on Traumathon. Maybe someday I'll dive deeper into these monsters, or maybe next year I'll talk about them in length. I'll just have a whole video dedicated on every single Silent Hill monster ever, whichever comes first, I guess. In the end, the scariest monsters we have in life are our own guilts and sins, haunting us forever, never leaving us alone and always tormenting us. And that's exactly what Silent Hill personifies so well. Growing up, I got to see a lot of things pass me by in the world of horror. For example, I didn't grow up with Friday the 13th, but I was around when Jason X came out, and I wasn't there for the original Halloween, but I did get to see H2O, which is terrible. Please don't watch it. God, I'm serious, don't watch it. So this sort of formed into jealousy. Jealous that I didn't grow up to see these kinds of horror movies and the legacy that they were building, just sort of the aftermath and kind of the collapse. Nowadays, I don't really have to look any further for these movies, as every other year, these once horror classics are being rebooted time and time again into something lesser. Well, sometimes it can work, but it'll never be the original. So as a teen, I went to my local DVD stores or went online to search for some horror movies, but not the contemporary ones everyone else knew. The ones that I could keep to myself, something that I can personally enjoy and know that it can't have been ruined by its reputation because it never had one in the first place. This is how I found out about Sleepaway Camp. Often considered a Friday the 13th knockoff, the movie stars a young girl and boy named Angela and Ricky respectively heading off to summer camp. It starts off by showing us some past trauma that Angela faced as a little girl when her father and brother were caught up in a fatal boating accident caused by negligible teens of the same camp she's going to. From here onwards, we see that the two of them get into some camp shenanigans like water fights, volleyball, swimming, baseball. Oh my God, what are you wearing? Jeez, man, they're kids. Cover up. Well, I guess this was back when this sort of thing was more accepted and less viewed as creepy, or dare I say it, gay. Ooh. But see, there's a problem with this camp, and that problem is, you guessed it, someone's killing off the campers and the staff. Now, who could it be, I wonder? Can't possibly be that one girl with the traumatic past that constantly gets bullied and sexually harassed. Nah, that can't be it. Maybe it's that cousin of hers. Surely a woman can't possibly.
Okay. Hello. so I think I finished the painting now. I do like how it turned out. It's a bit most of my paintings are a bit messy anyway, but I kind of like it. Maybe I will finish or add some details later or tomorrow. I don't know. I don't think so, because I think it's fine like this. So how long it took me? Like 2 hours. Okay, that's good. That's good. 2 hours is not that bad. Discounting the time I actually took, I guess it's almost 2 hours because it's 1:40 in the video, and it marks 1:52 in my ops. Okay, so for tonight, that's all. Sorry, I haven't been up to more content or anything that is streaming because I really haven't been feeling like streaming much. In general, hopefully it passes out. I'm not sure. I'm actually working right now on a thing, which is video, and like what else? I'm actually working on like a short, so I'm not sure if on Friday I will be able to stream. I didn't know I was going to stream today because I wanted to take this day for resting, but I still have stuff to do, so I'm never actually resting on itself. Tomorrow I may be working on the short as well as on Friday, so there won't be another stream for this week maybe. I'm probably gonna be very tired and probably gonna be editing the short. I'm not going to be able to show it because it's for a contest, but I can probably show some things I use for the short. So for tonight that's all. Thanks for watching, and I know we'll see you next week probably. Bye.